Good day. This video will talk about the use of a colorimeter. So a colorimeter is an instrument used to measure absorbance of colored solutions. So the first thing we have to select on the colorimeter is the wavelength of choice. And there's 4 wavelengths available. So the one that we want for the blue solution that I'm going to look at today is 635 nanometers. So I'm going to use these little arrows to move the wavelength over to 635 nanometers. And now we're going to look at the cuvette. So the cuvette is a vessel that's used to hold the solution. And a cuvette has 2 different sets of sides. One side of the cuvette is clear, so if you just look at it there, you can see all the way through without any striations. And that's the side that you want the beam of light to go through. If we turn it the other way, it has some striations that go down the side. It looks slightly opaque, and so that's the side that we would hold the cuvette. So holding the cuvette on those striated sides, take the cap off, and I'm going to put some deionized water in there because that's going to be our calibration solution that we want to set the colorimeter absorbance reading to 0. So I filled it about 3/4 of the way full. And then I'm going to take a lint-free wipe and wipe the outsides of those clear sides to make sure there's no fingerprints on there. And when I put it into the colorimeter, I want to ensure that there's a white arrow inside the colorimeter that you'll see at the top. And the clear side should line up with that arrow, which is where the light beam is going to enter. So we put it inside, we close the lid. And to calibrate the colorimeter, to make it a 0 absorbance, you press the CAL, the Cal button, until there's a red light that starts flashing. And when that red light stops flashing, you can take your finger off. And when we look at our screen, the digital meter screen here on the bottom left, you'll see that the absorbance has actually gone down to 0.001. Essentially 0, but there's a little bit of a randomness in that last digit. And now in your experiment for today, you're asked to click the Collect button to start your experiment. And I've already set up Logger Pro according to the directions. So we're going to click Collect. And then it'll change to a red stop sign to indicate that it has actually started collecting. So our first point for our standards is actually water at a 0 absorbance reading. So the water is already in there. So what I'm going to do at the top of the screen next to the stop button, I'm going to click the Keep button. It'll come up with an Events with Entry box, and we're going to enter the concentration in molarity of the blue dye. And of course this is just water, so the concentration of blue dye will in fact be 0. So 0, and then we hit Enter. So now we have our first standard, which is just a 0 point into our set of data. So the next standard is going to actually be a blue standard, and I've just made up a random concentration one here for illustrative purposes. But you take your cap off your colorimeter, dump out your water, and then you're going to take your blue standard and you're going to rinse the cuvette 3 times with the standard, with small volumes of solution. And when you do rinse, you want to make sure that you actually rinse all of the sides. So you're going to tilt the cuvette and let that solution touch all of the sides and then dump it into a waste beaker. So you're going to do that 3 times, ensuring that you're not diluting the solution once you do put it into the cuvette. And when you finally do get it rinsed 3 times, you're going to fill it at least 3/4 of the way full, because that's where the light beam enters, is just below the 3/4 mark. And when you're filling, it's common to get some air bubbles because we're using a disposable pipette here to fill. And when you do get air bubbles, what you want to do is just tap it on the bench. That might displace them. If that doesn't displace them, you can use the tip of your disposable pipette to just move them away from the glass if they happen to adhere. We'll put our cap back on. We'll wipe the clear sides again to get rid of any stray fingerprints. And then we're going to put it into the cuvette holder in the colorimeter. Close the lid to prevent any stray light. And this time the absorbance is going to change to some non-zero value, and it depends on the standard that you put in. Once the absorbance reading stabilizes, if there's just a little bit of movement in that last digit, that's fine. You're going to now press the keep button again at the top of the screen, and it'll ask you for the concentration. So that concentration you'll have calculated for your particular standard, so I won't enter anything right now because your concentrations will vary, and of course your absorbance readings will also vary depending on what the standards are that you're making up.